بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. And welcome to, wow, it's been a while since we had this session, subhanallah. It's been almost more than a month since we did the analysis of Surah Al-Qamar. The last time we had this session, we were talking about ayah number, I think it was ayah number 16 to ayah number 20. We did the sarf and the nahwu analysis of those ayat. And today, inshallah, we'll look at the explanation. Now, when I was doing the research for this, I thought, this is such a, because it moves from the story of Nuh, alayhi salam. We talked about the story of Nuh. We we began وَفَجَّرْنَا الْأَرْضَ عُيُونًا فَالْتَقَى الْمَاءُ عَلَى أَمْرٍ قَدْ قُدِرَ. And we were talking about just the punishment and how extreme the language of the Quran was in this, just depicting the imagery of the punishment of the people of Nuh, and also how sweet and how kind and merciful Allah was with Nuh alayhi salam and his people. تجري بأعيننا, like the way he talked about Nuh in those ayat. And then he mentioned that وَلَقَدْ تَرَكْنَاهَا آيَةً فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ, and here we said it goes back to either the story, qissa, or the safina. I find more convincing that it goes back to the story, because you can imagine, according to science, they say that humanity has been on Earth for over 150,000 years. And Noah is pretty early on. Okay? Noah is really early on. Like, is after Adam. Right, not right after, but yani very close to Adam. So he's very early on. And you can imagine right now we're still talking about the story of Nuh alayhi salam. SubhanAllah, that's how Allah has preserved the story of Nuh alayhi salam. If you say it's the Safina, I don't know, maybe some people believe that the Safina was preserved as well. I find it less convincing that a ship described as حملناه على ذات ألواح ودسر, as Allah has described it here. ذات ألواح, just a pile of wood and nails, would survive over 150,000 years. I don't know. Allahu A'lam. But yeah, the story makes more convincing argument. So that's where we stopped. And inshallah today we're going to start with فكيف كان عذابي ونذر ولقد يسرنا القرآن للذكر فهل من مدكر كذبت عاد فكيف كان عذابي ونذر. And immediately it shifts. So we're going to look at the conclusion of the story of Noah, and then we're going to immediately go to the story of Ad. فكذبت عاد فكيف كان عذابي ونذر. And just remember, in the beginning, Allah says, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّنَ الْأَنْبَاءِ مَا فِيهِ مُزْدَجَرٌ. News had come before. News of this massive news came to them from before. What massive news came to them from before? We looked at number one, كَذَّبَتْ قَبْلَهُمْ قَوْمُ نُوحٍ, the story of Noah. And today we're going to look at story number two, or evidence number two, which is going to be the story of Ad. And we're going to look at the story of Ad from كذبت عاد فكيف كان عذابي ونذر إنا أرسلنا عليهم ريحا صرصرا في يوم نحس مستمر. And then we're going to stop at تنزع الناس كأنهم أعجاز نخل منقعر. We're going to stop at ayah number 20. Then inshallah next week we'll proceed 21 to 25. So that's where we're going to end. And as you can see, like, the story of Noah was how many? The story of Noah was from ayah number 9 all the way to ayah number 18. So, sorry, ayah number 17. So all those ayats just depicting the story of Noah. And then you come to Ad, and it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm like, what's happening? It's just 5 ayat. It's very, and also, فكيف كان عذابي ونذر ولقد يسرنا القرآن للذكر فهل من مدكر. This is a part that keeps recurring. So if you're to remove this part, the story of Ad is just 1, 2, 3 ayat. Allah just mentioned 3 ayat depicting the story of Ad. And this confused me, because if you look at Noah, it was elaborate. If you come to Thamud, I mean, Thamud, he talked about Thamud quite a bit. And then, you know, so I was asking myself, why is Ad not mentioned, not talked about in as much detail? And I think we're going to see that shortly. Let me start presentation mode. Let's see what you're seeing. Are you seeing? Okay. Okay, so this is what we're going to start from. So we're starting with ayah number 16, which says, فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِ. How terribly serious my punishment and warnings were. Subhanallah, Allah painted an imagery. Remember when we were talking about the story of Noah and how the imagery was, water was like the skies opened. We don't know what was coming. And we said that, بِمَاءٍ مُنْهَمِرٍ, the ma could be understood as a tool. So the tool used to open the skies was ma munhamir. And then we don't know, like the water was a punishment, and maybe angels of punishment also descended. And then the earth was bursting forth in the entire, like the earth was bursting forth. There was no safe place to stand. Everywhere was just water. It was crazy. It was chaotic. It was like the punishment was just terrible. And Allah is saying, فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِ. How terribly serious my punishment and warnings were. Can you take this serious? In other words, can you just understand the gravity of this situation? Me and you and the people of Mecca who are hearing this ayat for the first time, can you take this situation seriously? Like there were people like you from before who rejected the message, who called the Prophet a liar, who called him insane. We remember that in the story of Noah, he was called insane. He was called Majnoonun was dujir. Insane. He's a mad person. He's a person who is bewitched. He has a jinn possessing him. That's what they said about Noah. And guess what? That's exactly what they said about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is not new. And Allah is saying these things have been done by people before you way long ago. Like almost a very early on generation did this. And do you know what we did to them? How terrible was that punishment? Can you take this seriously? Do you understand the intensity of this situation? So Allah is saying, فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِ. Like to make us this is a statement of ta'ajjub, amazement. Like, can you take this situation seriously? And again, Allah is using a question instead of a statement. Allah could have just said, my my punishment and warning was terrible. That's a statement. But Allah is saying, فَكَيْفَ. How terrible. Why? Because Allah wants you to imagine. Just imagine, use your brain and imagine how terrible it is. Don't just like, I'm telling you, my punishment was terrible, and you're like, okay, yes, yeah. But imagine how terrible it is. So the question enhances the effect. And we know from this surah how extreme the language is. So when Allah uses a question, He is trying to make the language extreme. Yeah, He's trying to portray that intensity of the situation of what is happening in this surah. So asking a question, using a question instead of a statement is completely in line with the way the surah speaks. The urgency, the scary nature of the surah. Allah is trying to paint that. And it just flows nicely with this surah. But at the same time, it paints a horrible imagery of the punishment and warning. Like it's not letting loose. When it's talking about the punishment, it's just, it keeps on escalating. It keeps on going up and up. And Allah wants you to imagine the waters, how it was, the situation, how terrible that punishment was. So you have to imagine. It's painting the warnings, that how clear, vividly in this form of a question, right? Let me give you an example. So for example, if I say, oh, how tough if I say, how tough was that exam, in form of a question, like, how tough was that exam? Oh my God, how tough was that exam? Versus the exam was tough. You can see that the question, it has more weight than when you just say a statement. And it has more like imagination attached to it. Because I'm asking you to imagine how tough it is. So the question here is a very clever way and a very intense way of portraying or making us imagine how serious the punishment, the warning of Allah is. And therefore, remember Allah says, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّنَ الْأَنْبَاءِ مَا فِيهِ مُزْدَجِرٌ. Muzdajir. We talked about the word muzdajir. Something that pushes you away So this should be able to push us away. When Allah is depicting this crazy imagery, chaotic imagery of the punishment that He descended upon the people of Nuh for rejecting the message of Nuh, we should be deterred from this message. This should, when the people of Mecca, when the Quraysh of Mecca, the Mushrikun of Mecca are hearing this, they should be able to deter them from denying the message, from rejecting the messenger, from calling him a liar, from calling him insane and all this stuff. Because the imagery is so intense, it should be able to act as a deterrence. That's the whole point. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّنَ الْأَنبَاءِ مَا فِيهِ مُزْدَجَرٌ. This is a deterrent. The stories, they have deterrent features in them. Subhanallah. And then Allah says, there's a very slight point here that I'm just going to mention in passing, and maybe later on we could see the implication of it. فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِي. That's what we said when we were doing the Nahu and Sarf of it. We said it's actually nudhuri. The ya has been made mahduf in writing because of that's how the Quran has been written. This is a very common thing in the Quran. When the ya comes at the end, and normally when we stop, we normally omit the ya because we don't want the sukun. Like, it's just a stopping. It's a thing that happens in the Quran, okay? But it's supposed to be nudhuri, my warnings. Now, this word nudhur, they say that it could be two things. It could either be the plural of the masdar form, which means warnings. So, the masdar, like warnings, yeah? So the plural of the word warnings, warnings. Or it could be the plural of the sifa form, warners. So nadhir, the plural, nudhur. Indar, the plural, nudhur. So they say it could either be one of those two. So it could either be فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِي, how terrible my punishment and my warnings were, or how terrible my punishment and my warners were. Like, I don't know how you would understand the warners here, but that's what they said. Of course, I find more convincing for it to be as a warning, right? It makes more sense as a warning because they were sent punishment and they were sent warnings. Yeah. And it was the nature of these warnings and the punishment that was terrible. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay, then we go to the next ayah. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. وَلَقَدْ starts with وَلَقَدْ. And we know when you have وَلَقَدْ followed by madi, this indicates emphasis in a permanent way. So Allah is saying, certainly, for sure, we made the Quran easy. Made, yassarna. Yeah? So no doubt about it. Allah is giving us an assurance by using laqad plus madi. And it's not just now. It's continuous because madi shows permanence. It's forever has been made easy. And then when we look at the word yassara, when we look at the word yassara here, لَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ, it has the meaning. So this is one of those words that has a lot of meanings. It has the meanings of gentility, abundance, and of course the one that we are familiar with, ease. In other words, we made the Quran gentle. And isn't it gentle? I mean, in as much as it has some warnings and some serious like lessons, but it is very gentle when you read the Quran. And it touches your heart. It touches you in a way that nothing else touches you. It comforts you. It just hugs you. Like, subhanAllah, I don't have the words to describe how the Quran interacts with you. And Allah is saying we had made it gentle. And also we made it abundant. This is a 600-page book. 600 plus some, whatever, give or take. And yet this book is so abundant, so vast, so knowledgeable. So, no matter how much you extract from it, you just get more and more and more. It's so abundant. And also the meaning of easy. Allah has made it easy to remember. How many people have memorized the Quran? You have 4-year-olds memorizing the Quran, 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds, like babies memorizing the Quran. You've watched those videos on YouTube or TikTok where you have this baby who can barely speak properly and is reciting Qul Huwallahu Ahad in a very bad way, but still, like, it's so easy to remember, isn't it? Subhanallah, Allah is saying how easy we have made the Quran, how abundant we have made the Quran, how gentle we have made the Quran. How many people have we had who read the entire Quran daily? How many people pray the whole night with the Quran? It has been made easy, and this ease is both in the words and in the meaning. It's not just in words alone. Yeah, there are people who have memorized the words, but also in meaning. Like any one of us can learn about the Quran and extract meaning. Any one of us can do tadabbur. Any one of us can sit with a couple of ayat and connect with these words and find gems and find lessons from these words. Subhanallah, it has been made easy to remember, both in words and its meanings. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ, particularly للذِّكْرِ, and we'll come to للذِّكْرِ in a minute. So Allah is saying, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ. Okay, so what does it mean that the Quran has been made easy? Like, we need to unpack this and understand this. So for those hearing this evidence presented, both at the time of revelation and also me and you now, we must understand that this Quran is the core of revelation. And it isn't a blessing that Allah, is indeed a blessing that Allah made it easy. SubhanAllah, today I was just reading one of the reflections somebody posted in Quran Reflect. By the way, if you're not on Quran Reflect, please join. You're going to benefit so much from other people's reflections, and you can also post your own reflections there. I was just reading a reflection that somebody posted, and I was like, I'm reading the words of Allah. And the way she mentioned it, it's like she realized for the first time that this is not just ordinary words. These are the words of Allah, subhanAllah. What a gift that Allah gave us His words. Like, who are we to deserve Allah's words? We're nothing. We're nobodies. Yet Allah gifted us the gift of His own speech. SubhanAllah, how special must He think of us? And yet we are nobody, we are nothing. That Allah gave us His own speech. SubhanAllah, it's such a blessing, this Quran. But at the same time, guys, at the same time, isn't it scary that it has been made easy? If the Quran has been made easy to remember, isn't that a scary thing for me and you who do not remember it, who do not mention it, who do not ponder over it? Because what excuse do we have? What excuse are we going to tell Allah? Because Allah is going to say, I made it easy, didn't I? What are you going to say? What am I going to say? SubhanAllah, this is a scary reminder. At the same time, you see the mercy of Allah, but at the same time, it paints the reality for what it is. If the Quran is my message and your message, if the Quran is my miracle and your miracle, and Allah is saying, I have made it easy to remember, then what excuse do I have for not remembering this Quran? May Allah protect us, may Allah guide us, and may Allah make us of those who remember this Quran. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. And again, this Quran, remember in the beginning when we started, we said that, what did we say? وَإِن يَرَوْا آيَةً يُعْرِضُوا وَيَقُولُوا سِحْرٌ مُسْتَمِرٌ. وَاتَّبَعُوا أَهْوَاءَهُم. That's what I was going on. وَاتَّبَعُوا أَهْوَاءَهُم. They chose to follow their own desires. And yet, the Quran is being described as hikmatun baligha, far-reaching wisdom. So if you want to protect yourself from following your own desires, you need to attach yourself from hikmatun baligha. You want to stop yourself from being like the previous nations that were destroyed who followed their own desires, and from the mushrikun of Mecca who followed their own desires. What do you need? You need hikmatun baligha. You need the Quran. So may Allah make us among those who follow this Quran, and don't end up like those who would have their eyes humiliated. خُشَّ عَنْ أَبْصَارُهُمْ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Is there anyone who's going to remember? Are you going to remember? Am I going to remember? Am I going to remind? Am I going to mention over this evidence that is being painted here in the Quran? فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Subhanallah. And just again, look at the whole idea of we made the Quran easy to remember. Look at how easy the story of Nuh alayhi salam has been presented to us. Hasn't it been made easy? Like, the story of Nuh is more than 950 years. Like, his life, his da'wah alone is 950 years. He lived longer than that. If you were to tell a story of a person who lived more than 950 years, you can't just put it in like 7 sentences. Yet Allah put it in like what, 7 sentences? And we got the entire story. Like, what was important Allah distilled it to its essence, and He presented that essence of the message of the story of Noah to us. What was relevant, He distilled it completely to what was important for us. That's how He made it easy. Subhanallah. Now, of course, we've had this phrase again, فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. It has come before. And then Allah is repeating it again. What is the significance of this repetition? For that, we need to understand what is the Quran. What is the Quran? The Quran is the final miracle to this final nation. This is our miracle. Other nations, they had different kinds of miracles. They had seen miracles. They had their prophets perform different kinds of miracles. For us, this is our miracle. Okay, so what did when we talked about miracles last time, we mentioned that with miracles you have to put in a little bit effort. We talked about the story of Maryam alayhi salam, and we said that she was commanded to shake a palm tree. What is shaking a palm tree going to do for a pregnant woman? Nothing. And yet Allah commanded her to do that, to make the effort. You want facilitation of ease? You want a miracle to happen for you? You have to make that extra effort. We talked about Musa alayhi salam. We talked about the mother of Musa alayhi salam, and how different miracles that manifested in their lives required them to make the effort. Musa was told to throw the staff into the. What is the staff going to do? The staff doesn't have the power to part the ocean, to part the sea. It doesn't have that power. Allah has the power. Why is he being told to do that? Because he has to take the effort. He has to show people that you have to work for it. It's not easy. It's not cheap. So if the Quran is the miracle that we have been given, that means that we have to make the effort. So فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ, make the effort. And again, the language, min muddakir, we talked about this min. It's zaida. It's not supposed to be there. Grammatically, it doesn't change anything if it's there or not. But because it's there, it has emphasis. Is there anyone at all who's going to take even the slightest bit of effort to make sure that this miracle becomes alive? This miracle illuminates your world. Is there anyone at all who do this? فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. So if you want to experience the miracle of the Quran, me and you, we have to make the slightest effort to understand it. And alhamdulillah, all of us here are on the journey of learning Arabic for the purpose of Quran. SubhanAllah, everyone who came for the Aramar program in Turkey, everyone was like, the teachers were asking us, why do you want to learn Arabic? Why do you want? And all of us were saying, for the Quran, for the Quran, for the Quran. And I pray that Allah is witness to that, and Allah, it will be like a hujjah, an argument for us, not against us on the day of judgment. Like, all of us are there because we want to understand the Quran. We want to know what is this beautiful message that Allah, His speech, what is His speech saying to us? What is this beautiful risala that Allah sent to us? Subhanallah, may Allah make us among those who experience the miracle of the Quran and put in the effort to understand the Quran. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Then we go to the word لِلذِّكْر. لَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ. Allah put a qaid, a restriction. He did not make the Quran easy and then just not put any restriction. No, He put a restriction. This Quran has been made easy for the sole purpose of remembrance. لِلذِّكْرِ. That's why it has been made easy. It's not made easy for anything else, for the sole purpose of remembrance. So don't be like, why is the Quran so difficult to, I don't know, balagha of it, or that's not why it's been made easy. It's been made easy for the sole purpose of remembrance and drawing benefit from pondering over the evidence that is being presented here. And in particular, within the context of this surah, it has been made easy to remember, because look at how Allah presented the evidences. He told us these people received news. They got news. They got the story of Nuh. They got the story of Ad, Thamud, Fir'aun. They got all these stories. Lut. They got all these stories from before. But the way Allah presented the message, it has been made easy to remember. Even as I explained to you, it's been a month since I interacted with this material. But subhanAllah, I remember what I presented to you guys, because it has been made easy for remembrance, because it has been made easy to ponder over the evidence that has been presented, not only in this surah, in particular this surah, but also throughout the Quran. So it is not a general principle that the Quran has been made easy as a general principle. No, it has been made easy for the purpose of remembrance. Remembrance is a very key part of how the Quran has been made easy. Now, while the Mufassirun have mentioned that this is in relation to memorizing the Quran, which is of course true, we don't deny that. And we have also witnessed that how easy it is to remember. We have so many people who can remember the Quran and memorize the Quran. But the point is, Allah did not say lil hifdi, because what do we call memorization? Hifd of the Quran, right? We call hifd. We don't call it dhikr. Allah particularly used dhikr, not hifd. So in as much as, yes, we can extrapolate dhikr to mention that it includes hifd of the Quran, which is true, but Allah did not use that word. And we know that the Quran is very, very particular in the way it uses words, in the way it arranges words, in the way it distinguishes this word over this word. Because if there's another word for memorization, why didn't Allah use it? Allah used dhikr. Why? To be honest, I don't know. I really don't know. And I couldn't find anything. Maybe I didn't do proper research. But here's just my idea. I'm just going to present my idea. It could be wrong. And if it is wrong, please correct me. And if somebody comes across this idea, also let us know in the chat. And if I make any mistakes, please, guys, like, I'm also human and I make lots of mistakes. So, and again, it's just part of us striving to understand what Allah is trying to say to us. So I was thinking that perhaps the least we can do as humans is to remember, because we are bound to forget. What is the, like, human? We're called insan, and one of the root words is nun sinya, nasiya, forgetfulness. One of our nature, part of our nature is to forget. But the thing is, every time we forget, this Quran easily, effortlessly, gently, and abundantly brings us back to, doesn't it? Like, it has the power. It has been made so easy for us to remember. Like, no matter how much you forget yourself, you open the Quran and it just reminds you who you are. It reminds you your purpose. It reminds you why you're here. It reminds you of the big questions. It reminds you. It is a reminder so that you can remember, so that I can remember. That is why lidhikri, so that we can remember. Because we are bound to forget. Our nature is to forget. So we keep going back to it. Every time we forget, we go back to it. It's like a dose of remembrance, a dose of remembrance. We have made it easy as a reminder. فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ? Are you going to remember? Am I going to remember? May Allah make us all those who remember. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Now the thing is, do you remember what you don't know? Can you remember? Is it possible to remember something you don't know? Like you've never interacted with it. You've never come across it. How do you remember something you don't know? If you don't know, you don't know. No, you cannot remember something you don't know. The thing is, you remember something you knew. Like, I knew this from before, I forgot it, and now I'm remembering. That's how remembering works, doesn't it? So when Allah is saying we have made the Quran easy for remembering, or we have made the Quran easy as a reminder, the question becomes, remember what? Reminder of what? What is the Quran trying to remind me of? What am I supposed to remember that I forgot? Well, the thing is, you need to remember the one truth. The reason why we're here. The truth that these nations are being punished. Why are they being punished? Because they rejected the truth. The one truth. What is the truth? La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. That is the truth. We are here to be reminded of our purpose of life. So when they rejected the message, when they rejected this truth, when they rejected the reminder that their prophets came with, then what else is there other than punishment? So Allah is telling us, our nation, the nation of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the last nation, we have been given something so powerful, something so amazing, something that has been facilitated with ease to remind us. Can you imagine? Let's go back to Noah a little bit. Noah had to, in Surah Noah, he actually explains how he did da'wah. And subhanallah, he called them, Inni da'awtu qawmi laylan wa nahara. I called my people day and night, and day and night, continuously. And I called on to them publicly. I went and called them and summoned them. And I told them, oh my people, come to Allah, come to the worship of Allah. Remember the truth why you're here. And I also secretly invited them. I knocked on their doors and I said, my neighbor, I'm warning you. I'm giving you glad tidings of Jannah. and I'm warning you against Jahannam. Please come to the worship of Allah. And Nuh is saying how he did all this stuff and how different ways in which he did the da'wah. It wasn't easy, was it, guys? The reminder wasn't easy. But subhanAllah, me and you, the Quran has been made easy. I can sit in my room without anybody else knowing. Even if like you're hiding your iman, you have Muslims who have become Muslims and they're hiding their iman from their parents. And this Quran is speaking to them without anybody knowing. That's how easy it has been made. You can just open your computer or open your phone and you can be able to interact with the Quran and nobody's going to know. It has been made easy. You can be able to search millions of different sites and just get information right at your fingertips from the Quran. It has been made easy. You have babies memorizing this Quran. It has been, subhanAllah, like the facilitation of ease that has been made in the from the Quran is just incredible, right? So Allah is wanting us to remember the truth that there is no God but Allah, and we need to worship Him, and we need to embrace our purpose of life. A truth that these nations being mentioned here, the nation of Nuh and Ad and Thamud and Lut and Fir'aun, these nations that were punished in this surah that Allah is mentioning here, they seem to forget. They seem to have forgotten. And they didn't want to remember. They chose not to remember. When the warnings came to them, when the prophets came to them with warnings, they chose to actively ignore. And not just ignore, they actually chose to deny the message and to fight the message, to go against the message, and they chose their desires over remembering. فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ? Is there anyone who's going to remember the Quran? Is there anyone who's going to remember the purpose of life? Is there anyone who's going to remember this message that was brought us here? Remember, وَمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ ما خلق الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. Allah did not create us except for the worship of Allah. That is our purpose here. So when a warner comes with that same message, it is upon us. We have to remember that message. We have to constantly remind ourselves of the message. Subhanallah. And that brings us to the end of the story of Noah. What like a powerful way to end the story of Noah. فَهَلْ من مدكر ولقد يسرنا القرآن للذكر فهل من مدكر. Is there anyone who's going to remember the story of Noah? So now we move into كذبت عاد. We go into the story of Ad now. This is the second evidence that Allah is providing us. So He provided the first evidence from the news that came before, the story of Noah. And now this is the second evidence. If you think like the message is not serious, Allah is presenting us 5 different nations that have done the same thing that the mushrikun of Makkah did to just prove his argument. Subhanallah. So now this is the second evidence. كذبت عاد فكيف كان عذابي ونذر. I'm reading this and I'm wondering, wait, we have heard this before, haven't we? It was كذبت قبلهم قوم نوح فكذبوا عبدنا وقالوا مجنون وازدجر. It came before, but it was similar. But the first question I asked myself, okay, so if it is like connected, كذبت, why didn't Allah say كذبت قوم نوح وكذبت عاد? Why didn't He put a waw ataf? Because it's connected, right? Like this reminds us of that ayah before. You hear كذبت and then كذبت. It kind of reminds you of that. So why is it not connected? Why didn't Allah connect that sentence with this one with like a connector, like wow or thumma? Because Ad came after Noah. It came after Noah. In fact, their prophet Hud told them, you guys are not really far from the people of Noah. Yeah. So they're very close in time. They're also very connected. So why didn't Allah not connect them? The thing is, let me give you an example. If you're looking at 2 people and you say, this is a criminal and this is a criminal, okay? If I say it like that, versus if I said, this is a criminal, this is a criminal, this is a criminal. It's different, isn't it? It's not, this is a criminal and this is a criminal and this is a criminal. Like if I said like that, then I've just bundled them up into like one thing. But Allah is saying, no, this is a criminal on its own. And this guy is also a criminal. Like it sort of intensifies the meaning. Again, just in line with the same theme of the surah. There's a lot of intensity, there's a lot of exaggeration, there's a lot of Allah wants us to, He's drawing our attention into this different situations. And in as much as the people of Hud, Qawm Ad, is similar, they did some similar things to the people of Nuh. Allah wants us to deal with them separately. Like, no, this is a set of new criminal. This was a criminal, and this is also a new criminal. Like that's how Allah wants us to sort of to reprimand and repeat the threat again. You know, like it's reigniting the threat again, just in line with how the tone and the expression of the surah is. Again, also, it could be because this is a different story. This is exhibit number 2. This is evidence number 2. So in as much as it is connected to evidence number 1 in terms of language, this is a totally different evidence that Allah is presenting to us. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. All right? Now, again, the maf'ul of كذبت is missing. Allah says, كذبت عاد فكيف كان عذابي ونذر. كذبت ماذا? What did they deny? It's not mentioned, which indicates maybe, perhaps, it is just a long list. Such a long list that we don't even have time to list it here. Or it doesn't really matter what they rejected. The thing is that they rejected the message. They rejected it. I don't have to spell it out for you. And the fact that it has been spelled it out before, we don't have to keep repeating it. So the rejection of the institution of Tawheed, the entire institution of Tawheed, كذبت عاد. عاد denied it. Now the thing I realized about as I was reading this surah, I haven't finished, by the way, doing research on this surah. I do it as I go. What I realized is that each story has its own telling. Like there's a way Allah tells a story. And each story, like the way He told the story of Nuh, is very different from the way he told the story of Ad. It's also very different from the way He's going to tell the story of Thamud and the story of Lut and the story of Fir'aun. It's going to be so different. Like each story has its own flavor, if you will. It has its own highlights, if you will. And in this particular telling of the story, the focus is not on what was rejected. Because remember, in the story of Thamud, story of Nuh alayhi salam, Allah said, كذبوا عبدنا. The focus was on Nuh. They rejected our abd, our slave. And we know that the relationship between, when Allah uses the word abd, it's not derogatory. It's a very loving term when Allah says abdi, my slave. It's a very loving, merciful, kind term to use. So Allah is saying, كذبوا عبدنا. They called our abd a liar. So the focus was on Nuh. The focus was also on the punishment because they painted a very vivid punishment, but there was some focus on also Nuh alayhi salam. But here on the story of Ad, Allah just says, كذبت عاد. Ad rejected. Ad denied. The focus is not there. And immediately, what does it go to? فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِ. It immediately goes to the punishment. So it automatically makes you think, wait, the focus here is not what Ad rejected, because that has already been mentioned in the story of Noah, but rather the punishment itself, like how terrible the punishment was. You know, it immediately draws your attention to the frightening nature of the punishment that befell them. فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِ. And we already unpacked some of the things that were mentioned in this ayah. فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِ. Speaking of it, it has already been mentioned, hasn't it? Like before the punishment was witnessed in the people of Noah. And yet here the punishment comes after. So in the story of Noah, Allah described the punishment and then He said, فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَنُذُرِ. Like after describing the punishment. Here, Allah hasn't even described the punishment yet. Allah is just saying, oh, they denied, they rejected. So let me tell you how horrible was my punishment and warning. Like immediately, you're scared. You're scared what is about to happen to these people because the punishment has been brought forward. Okay. Again, to enhance the fear and the terrible anticipation of what the punishment looked like. You're already scared. You don't even know what happened, but you're already scared. And that's why, when I began, I told you the story of Ad was only 3 ayat. So when I read this, I was like, okay, I'm expecting an elaborate explanation. Terrible. I want to watch a horror movie when I see فكذب فكيف كان عذابي ونذر. Then Allah is going to paint a horror movie, horror film, just on the story of Ad. And yet Allah just mentions 2 ayat, 3 ayat. Done. So I was a bit confused. What is going on here? What's happening? But before we get into that, we have to ask ourselves, so if Allah is highlighting the punishment, what is it that they did that Allah chose not to highlight their crimes, but rather highlighted their severe punishment? What exactly did these people do? I mean, I was curious. I was like, okay, whoa, we're just going directly into punishment. We're not even looking at what they did. What did they do? Like, I don't want to be punished like these people. Like, what did they do? So, of course, they did shirk, just like the people of Noah. That's a common thread among all these people, which is not a small thing, by the way. It's the big crime. So that's that. And the fact that they were drunk on power and wealth. That's the other thing. These people, if you read about the Qamu'ad, you would hear things like they were giants, they were really big people, and they were powerful, and they used to use their power and wealth, because Allah says we gave you children and we give you wealth. Yeah. So they used to use that power and that wealth that Allah gave them for evil, for dhulm, which led to their arrogance, because they thought they were huge in size and they had all this power and they had all this wealth, like nothing could touch them. They felt so arrogant and so powerful. And specifically, they also denied the day of judgment. They were like, no way we're going to be resurrected. So they chose to do the crimes they did because they were convinced, or they convinced themselves, that the day of judgment that doesn't exist. There's no way they're going to be held accountable. So they can get away with whatever they want to get away with. That's how arrogant, deluded, crazy, drunk on power they were. And we see that. SubhanAllah, we see that in today's world. We see people drunk on power and wealth so much that they assume they will never die. They assume there's no judgment day. There's no way that they will be brought back and judgment will be carried before them. This is the crime of Ad. And they also claimed, this is something when I was researching, I don't know how accurate these things are, but they claimed that when a person dies, he turns into dust, which is swept away by the wind. SubhanAllah. When I read this, I found this so amazing because it sounds like poetic justice. They thought that when a person dies, nothing comes of him. He just becomes dust and is swept away. And guess what kind of punishment would wipe them out of the planet of Earth? A wind. So they just assumed they're going to be swept away by the wind. And subhanAllah, Allah, in his poetic justice, sent a wind to punish them, to sweep them away out of this earth. Subhanallah. It's just so amazing. And again, they're going to be brought back on the day of judgment, the day that they rejected and denied, for judgment to be done again. So it's just punishment on top of punishment in this world, punishment in the next world. But it's so amazing that the thing that they rejected, the punishment, the thing that they thought was, they made fun of, like, it's just, are we gonna be swept away by wind? That same wind, Allah unleashed upon them. Subhanallah. How amazing is that? Let's continue here then. So Allah says in the next ayah, إنا أرسلنا عليهم ريحا صرصرا في يوم نحس مستمر. We send them a wind. عليهم ريحا صرصرا. The wind that they thought, they're just going to be swept away. Allah's like, yeah, I'm going to send you the wind. You just wait and see. We send them a wind. ريحا صرصرا. Okay, so we understand this vocabulary so far. Inna, we know. Arsalna, we know. عليهم, we know. ريحا, we know. What is صرصرة? This sounds new to us. So let's unpack the word صرصرة. Sarsara has the meaning of freezing. So some Mufassirun have said it's actually a freezing, really cold, relentless, extremely loud, scattering type of wind. It's like a tornado. It's like a massive, when the wind is blowing and it has this loud, screeching, screaming sound, that is what sarsara means. And it's also freezing. And it's also not ceasing, like it's relentless. It keeps on going and going and going. That is what sarsara is. But something cool I found about this word is it's actually muda'af. When you have it, I don't want to get into so much details about this, but you have fi'al ruba'is. In the fi'al ruba'i, when the word is, the root letters is sar, one, sa, ra, sara, then this type of irregularity in ruba'i is called muda'af also. So it's doubled in a sense. It's actually sirrun. In another part in the Quran, the word comes as sirrun. Yeah? No problem, Nida. It's fine, no problem. Yeah. Okay. So the word comes as sir. But here it's saran. Again, in line with the theme of the surah, Allah is using exaggerated language. So he doubled it in a sense. Sarsara. In a sense, it's muda'af. It's doubled. Perhaps even doubling its effect to indicate the intensity of this wind. This is not ordinary wind. This is sarsara. It's doubled in a sense. SubhanAllah. That's just my idea. I don't know if there's any merit to that, but I just thought it was cool that this is a kind of irregularity in the word muda'af. And maybe it's used in a sense to, show the intensity of that. Now, the thing is, I don't know about you guys, but most of us come from hot areas that do not experience such winds. I don't know if Decca in the UK, you experience these kinds of winds. I don't know, but like most of us in East Africa and in Pakistan, I don't know if you experience such kind of wind. It's very hot. So we need to understand exactly what Allah is saying. What is sarsara? So we're going to have a massive experience. I'm going to try and paint an image. Okay, I'm going to try and paint an image to what was happening with these people. Because again, remember, Allah only said like 3 letters. So we need to unpack, 3 sentences. So we need to unpack this intensity of this punishment that Allah captured in just 3 sentences. Like I expected an elaborate, but only Allah said 3 sentences. So we work with what Allah said. So let's imagine. Imagine you see a cloud coming. It's been so hot. The rains have not been coming for a long, long time, because that's what happened with the people of Ad. It's been a famine. And then all of a sudden you see a cloud coming and you were so excited. You're like, oh, alhamdulillah, it's going to rain. Oh, you've been so hot. You've been so thirsty. The earth has literally dried up. And you see that cloud and it's such a good feeling. You could almost jump out of your own skin. You rejoice because you think it's rain. And the cloud gets darker and darker and gloomier and gloomier. And now you're wondering, okay, what's happening? Is it going to be a storm? And the wind starts to pick up and you feel a breeze. And it's low and it's coming. And before you know it, the wind is let loose and it's unleashed like a wild animal. And it plucks everything on its way, crushes it, turning it into dust. You can hear the loud, the wind is so loud. It's sarsara, remember. You can hear the loud whistling sound as it approaches. And you can also hear the crushing sound as it plucks and plunders and destroys. You hide, but there's nowhere to hide. Where are you going to hide? Because this wind, it actually enters where you're hiding, pulls you out, and throws you onto the ground. It enters every crevice, every hole that you have built and you have carved into the mountain, and it turns into sand. The whole mountain crumbles. There is no place to hide. It is freezing cold because, again, this wind is cold, it's freezing, that your bone marrow freezes inside. Just imagine the pain, what is going on here. There is no escape from this. And it does not stop, guys. For 7 days continuously and 8 nights, it plucks, it destroys, it scatters, it freezes, it burns. Your ears are burning with the loud whistling, crushing sounds. Subhanallah. All this in the word sarsara. Where did I get all this? From the word sarsara. Subhanallah. This is why the Quran is so amazing. Like, when you just sit there and think about the Quran, I mean, stunning. So you get this entire imagery painted through one word. That's why Allah did not need an elaborate, I don't know, story about Ad. He just needed 3 sentences. That's all he needed for you to understand the intensity of the punishment that these people experienced. Subhanallah. Then we go to يوم نحس. في يوم نحس. What does this word mean? It means difficulty. This is one of those words that has so many meanings. Again, that's why Allah does not need so many words. He could just put one word, and this one word could just be enough. It means difficult. It means distress. It means hunger. It means drought. It means abstinence. It means oppression. It means harshness. It means abandonment, tyranny, dust, cold, smoke. Subhanallah, like this one word, nas, all these words. In other words, just imagine a terrible, 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 terrible state to be in. That was the day that was being described here. And again, we talked about Yawmi Nahsin, and we said mustamir, continuous, could be a sifa to nahs or could be a sifa to yawm. So in other words, Allah could be saying that the day was a really terrible, terrible, continuous day. Like the day was just continuous in being terrible. Or the difficulty was continuous. The harshness was continuous. The abundance, the terror, the cold, the hunger, everything was continuous. Subhanallah. And both can apply, because when you're having a difficult day, it feels that like that day is not ending. Like that yawm is mustamir. Like, why won't this day end? Because it's such a difficult day. Or the punishment was so terrible that it was never ending. And we know that this punishment lasted 7 days. 7 days and 8 nights. This punishment lasted. Subhanallah. في يوم نحس مستمر. And just you imagine that it's so much. Anyway, I need to hurry up because I think we're running out of time. And there's still so much to discuss. SubhanAllah, so much to discuss. So the interesting thing about mustamir is that this word was actually mentioned before. It came before. When they said, in yaraw ayatan, what did they say? Sihrun mustamir. This is just continuous magic. Then Allah brought it in terms of punishment. He's like, oh, you thought that was magic continuous? Wait till you see my punishment continuous. You called it magic. You called it same and same. You called my message continuous magic. Well, guess what? The punishment is also continuous. Let's see what you think about that. Subhanallah, like Allah is using the same words. You're like, oh, I had this before. Allah mentioned mustamir, and now He's again using this. So you think that the message, the warning, was continuous? You haven't seen the punishment. The punishment is continuous. Subhanallah. Again, just reminding the mushrikun of Makkah who rejected the sign and they called it continuous magic, the punishment of Allah is actual continuous. Like, you better be careful of that. Me and you also being reminded in this point. I'm going to skip that. We're going to go to تنزع الناس كأنهم أعجاز نخل منقعر, which is the last ayah that we're going to look at today. And this ayah, subhanallah, this ayah has a lot, guys. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish telling you everything. We're going to try. But just this one ayah, it got me spinning. Because again, remember, the story of Ad, just 3 lines, 3 sentences. Well, not sentences, but 3 ayat. That's it. And this one, I was asking myself, okay, first of all, these people whose punishment has been highlighted, and yet it hasn't been painted elaborately. Why? It's because every single word was chosen, beautifully. Like every single word was placed in such a beautiful placement and packs all the meaning that needs to be packed. So you come to تنزع الناس. تنزع, again, is one of those words that has like such a packed meaning. It means removing something forcefully, yanking, plucking, extracting, tearing it out from the ground, like pulling it from its roots. That's تنزع الناس. So you can imagine people hiding, whatever they were hiding, and they were just being plucked out by this wind. The question then becomes, from where? Where are they being yanked? تنزع الناس. Allah did not say تنزع الناس من بيوتهم, from their houses or from their marketplaces, or from where are they being plucked out? It is not mentioned. And the reason it's not mentioned is it could be perhaps because all of them were in different places. They were hiding. They were like, oh my God, the punishment has come. Some people were, in the basement, some people in the attic, some people were, I don't know, behind a tree somewhere, some people were under the different places. And in fact, some Mufassirun said that they actually dug graves. They dug graves so that they could hide in graves, subhanAllah. And this wind was just plucking them out from every corner, everywhere, in their graves, in the graves that they dug, in the massive buildings that they build on mountains. Remember, Ad was renowned for their massive buildings on mountains. So you can imagine the wind was actually extracting them, plucking them from these massive buildings that they built with tunnels going inside the mountains, and he just plucked them out. And also their graves that they dug, they were just being plucked up. Subhanallah. Upon it's just very, very intense. For 7 days and 8 nights. Imagine that, guys. It's not just one night. 7 days and 8 nights continuously, just the wind plucking them out from every single corner that they were trying to hide. All this an indication of the swift descent and encompassing nature of the punishment. It came down all at once, and it was everywhere. It was plucking people from everywhere for 7 days straight. Then we go to An-Nakhl. تنزع الناس كأنهم أعجاز نخل. Why palm trees? Why not any other tree? Why not just shajar, ashjar, just any tree? Why specifically palm trees? This question, I was stuck in my mind. Like, I was like, why palm trees? Is it because, these were Arabs and there are palm trees in Arabia? Maybe, I don't know. Or is it because Quraysh, the Mushrikun, are familiar with palm trees? Maybe. But also, you have to understand, there's a narration that Al-Qurtubi points out that this tashbih, this simile, comparing them to trees that have been plucked out, yeah, it represents what they did. It's about the holes that they dug. Remember when they saw the punishment? Some of Mufassirun said that they dug holes, trying to hide in those holes. And so when the wind was pulling them out of these holes, it left a massive hole. So the wind would remove the topsoil, pull them out, and just leave a massive soil. Just like when you uproot a tree, it leaves a hole behind. So some people have said that that's the relationship. But still, it doesn't answer for me the question, why palm trees? Because if you pull out any tree, it's going to leave a hole behind, doesn't it? Like any tree you put it out, it's going to leave a hole. So that to me is not really very convincing. So I wanted to understand a palm tree. Why specifically a palm tree? It could also be because describing them with palm trees is indicative of their height, their size, as also pointed out by Imam al-Qurtubi. Oh, sorry. Imam al-Qurtubi is the one who pointed out this point. The previous point about holes, I don't know. It's just mentioned in some Mufassirun books, just to clarify that. Anyway, so Imam al-Qurtubi is pointing out that they're described as palm trees because of their height, their size, which has been mentioned throughout our books, that they were really huge, just like palm trees. Could be. This is also a possibility. Also, as we're going to see, palm trees have very well spread root systems. They have fibrous roots. For those of you who did biology long time ago, or I don't know if it was science. So we have tap roots, we have fibrous roots. Fibrous roots are those roots that spread on the earth. They don't go deep, they go horizontally, not vertically. Now, describing Ad in this way perhaps goes to show their complex network systems and the network, the way they build their houses in such a complex network in mountains and carved into mountains, complex systems. But the fact, which shows again, by the way, how great of a civilization they were, because they were extensive, just like the roots, the fibrous roots of the palm trees. But the fact that Allah plucked it all out, He just yanked it all out, because it's really hard when the roots are really spread throughout the land, you need a lot of effort to pull it out. So it is indicative of the annihilation of this nature. In fact, no traces were left behind. Despite the extensive roots that spread all over the earth, they're nowhere to be found. All right. So we come to the word munqa'ir. Munqa'ir, again, the palm trees are being described as munqa'ir. Munqa'ir has the meaning of depth, the bottom end of something. You know, like a well, if you reach the bottom of a well, that is called munqa'ir. Aqara. Yeah? Qa'ara, sorry. That would be the part. So the idea that Allah is painting is that these palm trees, if you uproot them to the very bottom last root, like not even a single root has been left, like the whole thing was yanked out. Not even the roots were left. The imagery is that of a palm tree uprooted from their deep bottom ends. No traces, nothing left behind. And right now, we don't know anything about Ad. We really don't, which made me want to research more about palm trees. So I wanted to know more about palm trees. I'm not going to tell you, there's really so much to tell you. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to tell you all this. I'm going to skip some of stuff. But let's see. Okay. Maybe I can post some of these findings of the palm trees in the group so that you can draw some of the relationship that what is being said. Okay. So the thing, maybe I could just mention 3 points. One thing, the drawbacks of having shallow roots, because palm trees actually, they have shallow roots. They are fibrous roots. They spread across the earth, but it's very shallow. It doesn't go deep. Okay. The thing is with shallow roots is that it's not well anchored. Tap roots, they go deep. So it's very hard to extract the tree because it goes really deep into the earth. But with shallow roots, it's just on the surface. Okay, so it becomes easy to be uprooted during a storm. And then palm trees cannot tap into deeper subterranean water. They cannot tap into the deep waters inside the earth. And during erosion events, the roots initiations then may become exposed. So you can actually see the roots being exposed. Now, I'm going to go into what I derived from all that because I don't need to read all that. So anyway, points to note from all these cool things about palm trees. So the thing is, it perturbed me. It really disturbed me greatly how Allah mentioned so many details about the other nations, like I mentioned, but very little when it came to Ad. Now, it could be because the nation was lost to history. We don't know much about it, and very little is known to us. So even if he told us, what difference is it going to make? We don't know. We know very little about the people of Ad. But it could also be that it could also be that with these 3 sentences, so much is being said. So much is being said. So let's look at the palm trees. Okay, palm trees have fibrous roots, like I mentioned, and therefore making it susceptible to being uprooted by intense heavy storms. We mentioned this. Perhaps, just perhaps, this is also pointing to their values and belief systems. They weren't deeply rooted. When your iman is deeply rooted, like a tap root, when it's deeply found, it's really hard to uproot your iman. It's really hard to shake your iman. But because your beliefs are just like on the surface value, on the surface level, it's not really deep. Just like the palm tree, the roots are very shallow. Maybe Allah is trying to describe to us their iman, how they were, like their values and their systems. They were very shallow, not deeply rooted into the ground, right? And therefore susceptible to being easily corrupted by their own greed and desires. وَاتَّبَعُوا أَهْوَاءَهُمْ. That being said, it takes a really heavy storm to uproot a palm tree. Even though the palm tree has fibrous roots, it actually takes a really big storm to do it, to really uproot it. And Allah is saying that He just didn't uproot it. He uprooted from the ends, like where the root ends, like all of it was yanked out. So you can imagine the kind of intense wind it took to uproot these people, subhanAllah. Now, the roots of the palm trees, they have the ability to regenerate. But by Allah using the word munqa'ir, So if you cut a palm tree, you cut the root of a palm tree, it actually has the power to grow up again. But the fact that Allah uses munqa'ir, it means there's no chance of these roots growing ever again, because no roots, no trace was left behind. They were completely uprooted. Ad was completely destroyed. There is nothing that was left of them. Subhanallah. Palm tree, so we talked about how palm trees roots cannot tap into deeper water sources, much like the people they are describing, much like the people of Ad, who didn't tap into the deeper sources of revelation. They were given deeper meaning of life by their prophet. Their prophet came to them and gave them something deeper, something rich, and a source of revelation, a source of life. But because their roots are so shallow, because their beliefs are so shallow, they couldn't tap into that water. They couldn't tap into that source of revelation. Subhanallah. Just for me learning about palm trees. And then we also mentioned about erosion events. The roots initiation zone may become exposed, which prevents new roots from reaching the soil and reduces nutrients and water uptake. This erosion may weaken the plant as it ages, resulting into an unstable, mature tree. Just like the nation of Ad, who, when corruption sets in, it prevents chances of belief to sprout in their hearts. So even they're being described as palm trees shows how flimsy their iman is, shows how corrupted they can easily become, and there's really a lot more that we can discover about this word munqa'ir. But lastly, I'm just going to mention that this tashbih, this comparison between the people of Ad being yanked out like palm trees in this case, it could be that it is describing how they were, their state after they were yanked out. Some have also pointed out that the tashbih is the holes left behind, like I mentioned, but how they looked like uprooted, hollowed out palm trees. They looked like, so كأنهم أعجاز نخل منقعر. They looked like uprooted, hollowed out palm trees. But what does this mean? What does this signify? Safa mentioned that the possibility is that their heads was severed. So basically the wind came, plucked them out of their holes, wherever they were hiding, and then chopped their heads off. This is what the Mufassirun have said. Plucked them out, chopped their heads off, and dropped them on the ground so that they look like palm trees without any leaves. When you pull out a palm tree, it leaves a hole behind you, pulled it out, but then it doesn't have any leaves. So they just looks like hollowed out holes. That's what some Mufassirun have said this imagery is describing. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. And with that, subhanAllah, with that crazy, intense, chaotic scene being painted from the punishment of Allah to the people of Ad, we're going to stop there. And I'm going to open the floor if there are any questions, if there are any comments, and next time we shall continue with the story of, the finishing point of story of Ad, and then we enter into Thamud, inshallah, and we see what Allah is telling us about the story of Thamud. Right? Are there any questions, clarifications, comments before we can finally end? Okay. SubhanAllah. Looks like we're all good. So I'm going to stop the recording there. I'm going to stay maybe like a couple more minutes if anybody wants to ask me questions about the Aramar program. And then we'll see from there. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.